Hello and welcome back. It is now August 11th. Nice overcast but warm morning out here so far. There is a little bit of a chance we might see some rain here today, but so far it's not really looking like it. I also wanted to mention, I forgot to bring it up a couple weeks ago when it happened, we have now reached 500 subscribers. So that is great news. So thank you all very much for everybody who likes and follows this channel. It really means a lot to me. And yeah, at this current rate, we may be a paid YouTube channel in about 5 or 6 more years. So we'll see how that goes. Well, my dryland wheat trials are looking pretty good this week. They're developing pretty nice. We're into hard dough stage. Kernels are starting to firm up pretty good here. There's still a few green heads mixed in here and there, but most of them coming along pretty well. I'm gonna have to get my scythe sharpened up here pretty quick. I'm gonna have to start swathing this pretty soon. Cornfields this week are looking good. This one is a good 10 to 11 feet tall and looking pretty good so far. I think we've had good pollination so far. Too early to really tell yet. In you know, another week or so, a lot of these ears are going to be hitting the blister stage, and then we'll be able to tell a lot more about which ones are pollinated and which ones aren't. Irrigated oats are looking pretty good. As you can see, we have a little bit of lodging going on in here, which is almost to be expected. This is a huge, tall, big crop. It's pretty hard to keep oats all standing. These heads are starting to mature. You can see, even just by the color, they look a lot more mature than they were last week. You can see we've got a bunch of aphids in there, but we are starting to hit dough stage in these now, so we're getting less and less milk that squeezes out of these when you squeeze them now. So we're, you know, not close to harvest yet, but we're getting there. A couple more weeks. Well, harvest is started on these yellow peas. These were desiccated last week with some Regulant Ion, and they have desiccated down pretty well as some of the weeds like the Russian thistle and nicotia that was here and there throughout the field. So sounds like it is yielding pretty well so far, better than some of our pea crops the last couple drought years anyways. Well, I'm definitely finding more canola fields that are over threshold this week, so some pretty high numbers in some of these fields. Now, not all of these ligas are big enough that they would count towards threshold, but probably about 3/4 of them are in this field. We're probably sitting at about, 40 to 50 ligas in 10 sweeps. This is also the time of the year that we need to start watching this canola for signs of consistent color change. Once we start to see any sort of consistent color change, then we are typically out of the spraying time for ligas. The pods will be mature enough at that point. Feeding damage will be minimal or inconsequential and not worth the cost of application. So right now, this field behind me, it does look like we're starting to see some color change back there, but it's mostly just sunburn at this point, but the seeds are firming up. I think we will be starting to see color change next week for sure. Here in this canola field, I'm seeing some of my first aster yellows of the year. You can see this plant here. So here's hopefully a little bit better look at those structures. So this is a really interesting disease. What it basically does is it tries to convert everything into leaf tissue because it spreads by infecting leaf hoppers and beginning transmitted that way between plants. So it tries to turn anything that is not a leaf into a leaf to attract more leaf hoppers for more feeding and more spreading. But so far, I mean, I'm only really seeing 1 or 2 plants of it this season so far. So definitely does not look like it's going to be a bad year for it. Typically, what would be considered a really bad year would be maybe at the most a 10% infection rate. And depending on what stage it moves in, it may not even affect yield all that much. Well, this dryland corner of barley has just absolutely everything going against it. So this was pretty late seeded barley, and it was seeded into an old pasture that was worked up. So we had a relatively poor establishment here in the dryland corners and a relatively poor stand. So that has now led to, after herbicide timing, when we started getting the rains, you can see we've got flushing canola here, or kochia here. We got all this green kochia out here. So we're probably going to have to spray with heat and glyphosate. And we're going to need to do that for the barley as well. So you can see down here inside the canopy is our original main stem heads, which are pretty much hard dough stage, pretty much almost ready to run through the combine, really. But then it's absolutely full of all this new tiller growth, which is, for the most part, just at flower timing. So still has a ways to go here. Well, it is still haying season out there, and now that the rain has been pulled out of the forecast for this week, it should be excellent conditions to get some haying done. This alfalfa grass field is one that we just established here last year, and it is doing absolutely great. It's really been enjoying all the moisture we've had in the last month. We have exceptional second cut growth here at the moment, so first pass the swather here is looking pretty good. Well, it's not just green tillers and the barley causing problems in some of the dry land. It is also things like this, these wild oats. So when these wild oats are coming up like this, so thick in crop and nice and green, we should probably hit this with some heat and glyphosate. It'll at least sterilize those seeds, so if they do drop seed, it's not going to be a problem for next year, and hopefully it'll dry it down enough it can go through the combine without being an issue. Well, here we got some peas that were treated with Regulone Ion, and results are looking absolutely fantastic. So this we used added UAN, 20 gallons of water. You can see we've had excellent results in here on some of this big kochia. Very good dry down on the peas. We shouldn't have any problem getting this off the field and into the bins today. Well, now that some of the winter wheat fields are coming off, we got to start talking about post-harvest weed control. So this particular field, you can see we have some kochia that was in kind of the undergrowth that is now regrowing. So while it is green and healthy and moisture and soil conditions are good, it is a great time to try to get some control on these before they get too big. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend some DBH78 with some crimson and glyphosate in there. Get some of these burned off before they get any bigger. Second crop oats are looking really good this week. Still not seeing really any signs of barley yellow dwarf virus at all, especially compared to this time last year. So now that we are for the most part hitting boot stage, I'm not really worried about it too much anymore. Even if we do get barley yellow dwarf virus at this late stage, once we're past flag leaf, the results from it are usually relatively minimal. What I am seeing though is a big increase in the amount of aphids in fields like this one. We are probably, at or around threshold in here now, but I am noticing beneficial numbers like ladybugs and lacewing larvae have really increased in the last week as well. So I'm hoping they will continue to keep things under control, because they really do not suggest spraying for aphids unless you want to keep spraying every week. Well, there's definitely more Schlerotinia showing up in fields this week compared to last week. Last week, this field, you could barely see any. You can really start to see it now with some of these plants here really starting to prematurely mature. So when we go down into that lower canopy, you can see some of those white affected stems and lesions down here. So yeah, not nice to see. There you go, right there, Schlerotinia on that stem. Yep. But a lot of this canola, especially now we've had some hot sunny days, starting to mature pretty quick. I think next week we're going to be starting to see quite a bit of color change in some of these fields. Well, there should still be lots of fields of lentils out there like this, and this is certainly not the greenest one by any measure, but things are looking pretty good here. I think next week we will be mature enough we can come in here with the Regulone application. At the moment, there's just a bit too much green in here for my liking in order for a desiccation application. But right now, it looks like yield in here is going to be pretty good. You can see we've got quite a good amount of pods in here. These are green lentils, so I have high hopes for a pretty decent yield. I guess we will see in a couple weeks. Quite interesting seeing the Schlerotinia develop in some of these fields. We haven't really had a bad year for Schlerotinia in a few years now. The interesting thing about this dryland field is we had a spore trap with a company about a mile away, and that spore trap, according to the company, never hit a high enough spore load of Schlerotinia to justify spraying. But we did go ahead and spray that irrigated field anyways, but this dryland one we did not, and this was directly downwind. And as you can see, we have a pretty good amount of Schlerotinia in here. When I go in and start checking stems, we're at basically a 20% or more infection rate of Schlerotinia. So this is the potential to be extremely bad. And you can see when we start looking at these plants here, you can see that shredded bottom stem on this one. These ones too here, that stem is completely done right at the base here. This one a little bit higher up. This one here, you can see it is affecting the stem down here, but it's not complete yet. But you can see we have that white mold up here at the axil of this branch. So quite interesting to see. It's pretty much spread right throughout the field in here. So yeah, it really makes me second guess the utility of having spore traps. I think, if conditions are going to be like this, we're going to have to get back to starting to spray some of the dryland acres again. Field conditions by Lethbridge are definitely a bit on the wet side after the rain last night. Down by McGrath, Raymond area, everything is pretty dry. There was no rain down there, so guys are starting a little bit of harvest and swathing down there, but up here, pretty wet. I take the blame for that myself. I made the mistake of washing my truck yesterday afternoon. Well, that'll be it for this week. It sounds like we're supposed to have some pretty warm temperatures over the weekend and into early next week. So I'm sure things are going to start to ripen up and turn really fast in the next week or two. It's really going to feel like we're hitting harvesting time. So we will see you next week.